Welcome to News and Views. I'm your host, Rob Schofield. The initial weeks of the second Trump administration have been, to say the least, chaotic. Between the slash-and-burn firings and funding cuts Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency has sought to impose on everything from Medicaid and other safety net programs to the Department of Education to veteran services to support for university research, numerous vitally important public services have been placed in jeopardy. Thankfully, some elected officials are not standing idly by, but instead speaking out and pushing back against the Trump-Musk blitzkrieg, and recently I caught up with one such leader, North Carolina 4th District Congresswoman Valerie Foushee. Well, Congresswoman Valerie Foushee, welcome back to News and Views. It's great to have you back with us.
It's good to be back with you, Rob. Thank you.
My goodness, what a time to be in Washington. I'm sure there are days when you wake up and say, what have I gotten myself into? This chaotic and disruptive actions we're seeing from the Trump administration during its first several weeks. I wonder if you can even describe what you've witnessed that's been playing out before your eyes as you represent your district on Capitol Hill.
Well, I think you said it in a good way as it relates to what we're seeing. It's a lot of chaos and confusion that is causing anxiety across our nation. I think we all know that President Trump ran a campaign about lowering costs and making sure that things were going to be great for every American. And certainly that's not what we're seeing. And this whole crusade about getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse is not what is happening. We're seeing that costs are rising. People are fearful of keeping their jobs. They don't know whether they'll be able to afford health care. We're not seeing a reduction in costs for food or gas or any of those things that he promised would happen were he to be elected president. So this whole situation where we see flooding the zone, keeping people off guard so that there's a sense of inevitability, that there's nothing we can do about what's going on. And that certainly is not the case. And Democrats will continue to work against this. We will continue to resist so that we can bring to the American people what they deserve.
Talk to us about, in your district, I'm sure you're hearing from people who've been fired. Maybe they work in a nonprofit that's had its funding cut off, or maybe they are federal employees. I'm sure you're getting those kinds of calls and those kinds of expressions of concern from people in your district.
And of course we are, particularly when we first saw what was happening with USAID. Now we're hearing about the same kinds of things happening at RTI, EPA, federal employees across the country, and certainly in this district are fearful of what's going to happen next. Many of them have already lost their jobs, and it's through no fault of their own. They're receiving notices that don't explain why they're losing their jobs. We're hearing from Trump's co-president that we're getting rid of fraud, we're getting rid of waste, but by what method? There's not a scalpel being used. You know, this image that Musk has of using a chainsaw to cut away is just destructive. It's not benefiting anybody, and there is no way that we can see by any transparent means what they're doing that's favoring our government.
One area where we see the cuts, they seem to take effect and then they're pulled back, or maybe a court strikes them down, is in the area of veteran services. We know that got an awful lot of veterans in North Carolina who rely upon these services. And actually, that was one of the things that the Biden administration made some real progress was with services for veterans, the PACT Act, things like that. It seems like now that's all we're not even sure what the status of it is right now, but it seems that that's another area of grave concern.
And that's despicable for this nation to not take care of those who keep us free, keep us safe, and they return back to the communities and can't get the benefits that they've earned, particularly here in this district where we have a VA hospital, and we have already seen employees at the VA lose their jobs. Now, if you talk about what needs to happen at the VA, certainly we've heard criticism. But most of that criticism that I've heard since I've been in office has been about understaffing and not having enough staff to serve our veterans, So you can't fix that issue by cutting staff, and they are fearful about being able to serve their patients. They're there, they're working hard, they're working overtime, but they're not being appreciated and they're not being given a sense that they can continue to do their jobs. And why would we treat our veterans this way?
It's an amazing circumstance. Another area in the healthcare realm where I know you have deep concerns has to do with Medicaid. There is talk of these multi-$100 billion cuts to Medicaid so that we can do some
$880 billion. So you're talking about SNAP, you're talking about WIC, you're talking about Medicaid for healthcare for children and disabled and seniors and veterans. It's despicable.
Do you hear from any of your Republican colleagues that maybe even they have some concerns about what this is going to do in places like North Carolina, where we have so many people dependent upon these public programs?
I think that has been what's been most disheartening, that we are not hearing from our Republican colleagues in a manner that they are pushing back for their constituents. As a matter of fact, it seems as if they're right on board with what Presidents Musk and Trump are putting forward. And the sad thing is we're seeing Project 2025 roll out in real time, and that you're watching folk just cave into what this has done by way of destruction. That's very disheartening. I was asked to consider talking to some folk who are not in my district because they can't get responses from their representatives. And indeed, we're being told that their leadership is asking them not to do town halls, because what we have seen across the country is a pushback from everyday Americans, no matter the stripe. They are seeing in real time what is happening to our country, and it's happening at such a pace that people, I think our communities realize that if they don't speak up now, then this is really going to get out of hand, and it's going to take more than one election cycle to fix it.
We're talking with Congresswoman Valerie Foushee of North Carolina about the chaotic situation in Washington that the Trump administration has inflicted in recent weeks. Another area in which I know you have deep concerns is public education, where it appears that the person who's been put in charge of our Department of Education has been charged with dismantling it and literally doing away with the federal Department of Education. That's obviously an area that would have huge impacts across the country and again here in North Carolina.
Oh, absolutely. And when you consider that she, in fact, says that she doesn't believe that this executive order is constitutional, that's interesting to me. When we talk about dismantling the Department of Education, we're talking about the one thing that many Americans believe is the pathway out of poverty. We're talking about the one thing that we know is put in place to make sure that our civil rights, as it relates to people with disabilities, that's what the Department of Ed does. It makes sure that all students have access to a sound basic education. It is the one thing that we count on. The situation that you can have an executive order to do away with a department that was created by Congress should be alarming to people, that those things that Congress put in place by people who have been elected to represent the citizens of this country can be just struck down by one person who says, no more. We're not going to protect people anymore. We're not going to see to it that people have opportunity. We're not going to see that people be given the means to create the best life for themselves that they possibly can.
As long as we're speaking about education, I have to ask about the dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You share on your congressional biography that you grew up during a period in which our schools were segregated, officially segregated. We've made some progress in the society. DEI, the modest efforts in DEI are one little part of that progress we've made. And now that's another area where we're just literally purging it from websites and from staffing. I've got to believe you're concerned about that as well.
Absolutely. And I think that when we talk about a situation where I came from, where separate really was not equal. And so to be on a path where you can provide equitably for all students, understanding that all students don't have the same needs, but where there's an opportunity to make up for times when many of our students were either unserved or underserved, and just being given an opportunity to be on equal footing with other students. Just a modicum of funding for programs that will lift up. And I think you and I have spoken before. I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so you don't have to take away from some just to give to the others, just provide the opportunities. Diversity, we should all embrace. We should worry about a nation that does not welcome differences. Inclusion, what's wrong with making it safe for everybody to feel a part of a situation? And certainly, it should not be fearful to anyone that because I have, someone else can't have. Why can't we be diverse in how we consider our opinions, what we're good at? Why shouldn't we be inclusive of everybody, of all religions, all races? Why wouldn't we want to make sure that situations are equitable, particularly for our kids? And why would we not want to know our history?
The simple word that you used of make sure. I mean, we have this in what the Republicans, of course, will say is, well, yeah, we don't discriminate. Everybody's got a fair shot. But of course, if you're not intentional about it, if you don't make sure that's happening, that's when things tend to go the wrong way. It seems like a simple concept.
Well, I think if you come from a place of privilege, the fact that somebody else might take away from what you have may be frightening. I don't know that feeling, but I get a sense that perhaps if you think that you will lose so that somebody else will gain, I guess that would make some folk uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially if the person who's sitting in the White House is trying to foment that fear. We're coming to the end of our time with Congresswoman Valerie Foushee. It's been a wonderful conversation. We won't want it to make it all bad news. There is a piece of legislation that I know you're working on. You've been working on for a while, both in the previous Congress and in this one, sort of a practical approach to attacking the climate emergency. It's sort of just a common sense kind of piece of legislation. Talk to us about the Impact Act that you've been working on.
So the Impact Act, which is the Innovation Mitigation Partnerships for Asphalt Concrete Technologies, is a bill that was introduced by myself and Max Miller. It is a bipartisan bill that will work on decarbonization in the production of concrete, cement, and asphalt. What we do know is that globally, cement facilities account for 8% of carbon dioxide. Absolutely. And so the opportunity to provide for research and development such that we can put forward technologies that will reduce the carbon emissions and make it a situation whereby American companies would have the upper hand in producing cement, asphalt, and concrete in a way that it's made here, it's produced here, and it is used here. We're excited about that. And again, hoping that because it passed the House unanimously by suspension, that it will follow that same pattern this time. It's already been referred to Science, Space, and Technology, a committee on which I serve. And we're working on our partners in the Senate so that we'll get the same results on the other side of the Capitol.
Seems like a no-brainer, especially as we continue to build and invest in infrastructure to combat the climate emergency. These are the kinds of common sense paths we need to take. And we really appreciate you taking the lead on it and all the work you're doing during these difficult times. Thanks so much for taking some time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, Rob. Always
We'll
a pleasure.
talk again soon.